The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was a Tuesday. My name is Andre. I'm 42, an IT systems analyst, and more importantly, I'm a single dad to Lucas, my 9-year-old son. Ever since his mom left, it's been just the two of us. Video games on Fridays, pancake Saturdays, and long talks about dinosaurs and outer space. But lately, those talks had faded. He came home that day with his shoulders low and his eyes on the floor. I asked how school went. "Fine," he muttered, barely audible. No excitement, no details, just that single word. I brushed it off at first. Maybe he was tired or had a tough day. But then it happened again the next day, and the day after that. Lucas, who used to tell me every little thing about his classmates, had gone quiet. At dinner, I tried pulling him back out. "Did something funny happen in class today?" He shook his head. "What about that math game you love?" "Nothing." He moved food around his plate, didn't eat much, and went to bed early without asking for our usual bedtime story. By the end of the week, I was starting to worry. He wasn't just tired, he was withdrawn. I even caught him flinching when I raised my voice slightly to call him from the other room. That wasn't like him. I asked him directly one night as we sat on the couch, "Lucas, is someone being mean to you at school?" He hesitated, then gave me this hollow smile and said, "No, Daddy, it's okay." But it wasn't. The final straw came on Sunday. He told me he didn't want to go back to school the next day. He looked at me with this strange mix of fear and resignation, as if going back was something he had no control over, something he dreaded. That night I couldn't sleep. Something was wrong, and I was going to find out what. The next morning I dropped Lucas off at school, but instead of driving straight to work, I parked around the corner and waited. I watched him walk through the front gate with his backpack hanging off one shoulder, looking smaller than he actually was. There was no spring in his step, no wave goodbye, just that same heaviness in his body I'd been noticing all week. I stayed in the car for a while, staring at the building, then finally decided to go in. The front office secretary recognized me right away. "Oh, Mr. Silver, Lucas is such a sweet boy." Her smile felt too wide, too rehearsed. I asked to speak with his teacher, Ms. Raquel, and a few minutes later I was ushered into a small meeting room. She arrived with a clipboard and that same polite tone educators use when they're trying to be firm without sounding defensive. "I understand you're concerned," she said, sitting across from me. "Lucas is, well, he's quiet. A bit more introverted than the other kids, but nothing alarming." I told her what I'd been noticing. The withdrawal, the silence, the sudden resistance to going to school. She nodded, took notes, but kept insisting there were no incidents she could recall. "Kids go through phases," she added. "Maybe it's something at home?" That hit me like a slap. I kept my voice calm but firm. "Lucas is safe at home. This started recently. I need to know if anything has changed here." The school counselor joined the conversation, echoing the same sentiment. "We'll keep an eye on him, of course," she said. "But honestly, Mr. Silver, you might be overthinking. It's all in your head." I walked out feeling like I was the one being unreasonable. But that evening, when Lucas avoided eye contact again and pushed his dinner away untouched, I knew better. I wasn't imagining this, they might not see it or didn't want to, but something was happening behind those classroom doors, and if they wouldn't look closer, I would. The following weekend, I was organizing Lucas's school materials when I found one of his notebooks half buried under his bed. It wasn't one of the neat ones he brought home to show off. This one was creased, pages bent, a few dog-eared at the corners. I opened it, just curious at first. A few math exercises, some scribbled doodles. But then on a page near the back, written in small letters at the bottom corner, I saw a sentence that made my chest tighten. "Nobody likes me." Not even the teacher. The words were faint, as if he didn't want anyone to see them, maybe not even himself. But they were there. That quiet pain he had been carrying, now on paper. I sat down on the edge of his bed, still holding the notebook. My son, my goofy, talkative, imaginative boy, thought no one liked him. And worse, that the very person who was supposed to guide and support him in the classroom had somehow made him feel that way. I didn't confront him about it right away. I wanted to. Every part of me was screaming to ask him what happened, but something told me not to push, not yet. I needed to be smarter than that. That night, as I tucked him in, I kissed his forehead and asked him softly, "Is there anything you want to tell me, Lucas?" He looked at me, and for a second I thought he might say something. His lips parted. But then he shook his head and turned to the wall. I turned off the light, went to the living room, and sat in silence for a long time. If a kid can write something like that in a notebook, he's not just having a rough week. That sentence was a cry for help, one he wasn't ready to say out loud. I wasn't going to wait for someone else to notice. That was the moment I decided. I had to act. Quietly, carefully, but soon. By Monday morning, I had a plan. I didn't sleep much the night before. Instead, I spent hours researching discrete voice recorders. I found a model the size of a thumb drive, with 12 hours of battery life and voice-activated recording. It was delivered the next day. I tested it that evening. My own voice, the sound of the TV, even distant traffic through the window. The audio was clear, too clear. My stomach turned at the thought of what it might capture inside that classroom. The next morning, as Lucas was brushing his teeth, I slipped the recorder into the inner pocket of his backpack, tucked behind his pencil case. I told myself it was just to confirm what I already suspected. I wasn't even sure it was legal, but at that point I didn't care. My son was hurting and nobody believed me. After school, I acted normal. We had dinner, watched an episode of his favorite cartoon, and I waited until he was asleep before taking the backpack into my bedroom. My hands were shaking. I connected the recorder to my laptop and hit play. The first hour was just background noise. Chairs scraping, pages flipping, students mumbling. Then a voice sharp and sarcastic, definitely adult. Well, if Lucas actually read the instructions, maybe he wouldn't always finish last. Some kids laughed. My jaw clenched. Another clip. Come on, even Lucas managed to get that one. That means it's really easy. More laughter. The voice never yelled. There were no threats. But the tone, mocking, dismissive, cold, cut deeper than any shout, and it was repeated, over and over again. He wasn't just being ignored. He was being humiliated, publicly, casually, like it was normal. I sat there for hours, listening, rewinding, making notes. I didn't even realize I was crying until I wiped my face and saw the moisture on my sleeve. I had my proof. Now I needed a way to use it, not to start a fight, but to make sure this would never happen to him or to any kid again. The next morning, I sat at my desk with my headphones on, listening again. I needed to be sure I wasn't overreacting, that my anger wasn't distorting what I was hearing. But the more I listened, the more certain I became. This wasn't just one bad day or one unfortunate comment. It was a pattern. There was something disturbingly casual in the teacher's tone. He didn't raise his voice or curse, but the way he singled out Lucas made him the punchline, encouraged other kids to laugh. It was calculated. Lucas, maybe this time try reading before you answer, huh? Silence, then laughter. Oh wait, that's right. We all know reading's not your strong suit. It wasn't just ridicule. It was public embarrassment, day after day. I imagined Lucas sitting there, shrinking into his chair while the room laughed around him. My son, quiet and kind, enduring this cruelty in silence. Another clip hit harder than the rest. A student had asked a question, and the teacher replied, "Don't worry, you're still smarter than Lucas." The classroom burst out laughing. I paused the recording. My hand was clenched so tightly my knuckles were white. This man, this adult entrusted to guide children, was using his authority to tear down a 9-year-old. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall. I wanted to drive to that school right then, storm into that classroom and drag the man out by the collar. But that wouldn't help Lucas. It would only cause chaos. I needed something cleaner, something they couldn't ignore or dismiss. I took a notebook and began organizing the audio files. Date, time, exact quotes. I marked the worst ones and flagged timestamps. My mind, still buzzing with fury, was also sharpening into focus. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to threaten. I was going to document, prepare, and act in a way that made it impossible for them to brush this aside, because now I had his voice, and it was going to speak for my son. I spent the next 2 nights gathering everything. I clipped the worst audio segments and labeled them clearly, each one no longer than 45 seconds, just enough to capture the tone, the words, and the reaction of the class. I added short transcripts beneath each file and bundled it all into a password-protected folder on a flash drive. I stared at that drive for a long time. Part of me wanted to confront the teacher directly, slam it down on his desk, and make him listen to himself. But that wouldn't fix what had already been done. And it wouldn't protect Lucas. I needed to do this the right way and the responsible way, even if I felt anything but calm inside. So I reached out to someone who'd know better, a former client of mine, Carolina, who now worked as a child advocacy lawyer. I told her what I had without naming names and asked if she could meet. We sat down at a coffee shop near her office. I handed her the drive. She listened to one file with her brows furrowed, then listened to a second. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "This is emotional abuse, Andre. You're not overreacting." I finally felt like someone saw what I saw. Carolina laid out the options: contacting the school, filing a formal complaint with the Regional Board of Education, or even pressing legal charges if necessary. I didn't want a lawsuit. I didn't want media attention. I wanted the teacher removed. I wanted accountability. And I wanted Lucas to feel safe again. Together, we drafted a formal complaint. She helped me write a calm, factual letter. No emotion, no speculation, just excerpts, timestamps, and the demand for an internal review. By Friday, it was ready. That night, after Lucas went to bed, I opened my email. I attached the files, the letter, and the legal contact for Carolina. I addressed it to the school's director, the Regional Education Board, and the Child Protection Committee. My hand hovered over the mouse. Then I clicked send. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. I didn't expect a response overnight. Bureaucracies move slowly. I knew that. But the next morning, my phone rang at 8:15. It was the school director. Her tone was clipped, formal, but under the surface I heard it. Urgency. She asked if I could come in for a meeting that afternoon. "We've reviewed the material you sent," she said. "It's concerning." That word, concerning, didn't come close to what I'd heard on those recordings, but I let it go. I agreed to the meeting and called Carolina to let her know. She said she'd come with me. At 2 o'clock, we walked into the school together. The front desk receptionist, usually all smiles, wouldn't meet my eyes. We were led to a small conference room. Inside were the director, the school counselor, and one man I didn't recognize, a representative from the education board. No one offered coffee. No one made small talk. The director started by thanking me for bringing the issue forward. Then she said the phrase I'd been waiting for. "After reviewing the evidence, we've decided to place the teacher on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation." I kept my expression still, but I felt my shoulders drop a little. It was the first solid move. Carolina spoke next, calmly outlining the legal implications of what had been captured in those recordings. She made it clear that if action wasn't taken, we would have no choice but to escalate the matter further. They nodded, took notes. No one argued. The board representative spoke last. "We'll be conducting interviews with students and staff over the next week. In the meantime, Mr. Silva, we want to assure you that Lucas will be placed in a different class under temporary supervision." I thanked them, not because I felt gratitude, but because I wanted the meeting to end with clarity, not chaos. Outside, Carolina turned to me and said, "They know they messed up. Now they're scrambling to cover themselves." Good. Let them scramble. I wasn't after revenge. I was after truth. And for once, it wasn't just my word against theirs. 2 days later, I was called back for another meeting. This time, it wasn't about process. It was about impact. The school had finished their initial internal review. They invited me to attend a follow-up conversation with the same group from before. I could tell they wanted to keep things quiet. No emails this time. Just a phone call and a polite request. I showed up alone. Carolina told me I didn't need her for this part, that it was time for them to listen. The room was the same, but the energy had shifted. The director looked tense, her hands folded tightly in front of her. The counselor avoided eye contact. The board representative was the only one who seemed composed. "We've concluded our preliminary investigation," he began, sliding a printed report toward me. "The teacher in question has been formally suspended. A disciplinary hearing is scheduled. He will not return to this school." I nodded, expression neutral. Then the director spoke. "Mr. Silva, we want to sincerely apologize for what your son experienced in our school. It should never have happened." That moment hung in the air. The apology was professional, rehearsed even, but it was something. A record, acknowledgement. And I needed that for Lucas. I asked a single question. "Will this go on his record?" They said yes. "It will be reported to the state's Professional Conduct Committee." I didn't smile. I didn't thank them. I just said, "Good." Before leaving, I handed them one final folder, a written statement of events from Lucas's perspective. I had helped him write it over the weekend, using his words, his memories. It was short, honest, quietly devastating. The room went completely still as they read it. No one spoke for nearly a full minute. When I left the building, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. But in that silence, that rare moment of institutional shame, I knew the message had landed. What was done couldn't be undone. But from now on, it couldn't be denied either. The following week, Lucas was assigned to a new class with a substitute teacher, Ms. Adriana. I'd met her briefly when she taught an art workshop last semester. She was young, warm, and spoke to children like they were people, not problems to manage. On his first morning with her, I offered to walk him in. He hesitated, then nodded. When we arrived, she greeted him by name, without looking at a clipboard. "Hi, Lucas. I'm really happy you're with us today." He didn't say much, but I saw his shoulders relax just a bit. That afternoon, he came home with a drawing he'd made in class. It was a volcano, erupting. In the corner, he'd drawn a tiny figure, smiling, watching from a safe distance. When I asked about it, he shrugged and said, "It's just a drawing." But I saw more in it. Word of what happened began to circulate quietly among other parents. A few reached out, not to gossip, but to thank me. One mother said her daughter had also felt uncomfortable with the teacher, though she'd never spoken up. I didn't name names. I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. The school sent out a generic notice. Personnel change due to internal matters. But for those paying attention, it was clear. One afternoon, Lucas told me the class had a short assembly. The director addressed the students about respect and kindness, and afterwards, Ms. Adriana had a private conversation with the group. She said we all deserve to feel safe, he told me that night. And if we ever feel scared or embarrassed, we can talk to her. That was the moment I knew we had turned a corner. Lucas didn't suddenly become the loudest kid in class, but he stopped dreading school. He began telling me stories again, about games at recess, about a joke a classmate told, about how Ms. Adriana let them write their own quiz questions for fun. Justice didn't come with handcuffs or headlines. It came in the form of a quiet classroom, a caring voice, and a boy who finally felt seen again. A few weeks later, I saw it. Not just a smile, but his smile. We were at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning making pancakes, something we hadn't done in a while. Lucas was whisking the batter, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration like it used to. Then he looked up and said, "Can we add chocolate chips today?" It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them. Playful, light, full of that old spark I thought might be gone for good. I nodded. Of course we can. That moment, as small as it seemed, carried the weight of everything we'd been through. The silence, the notebook, the recordings, the meetings, all of it led here. To a kitchen, to a boy laughing, to chocolate chip pancakes. I didn't tell him everything I did. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I did tell him this. "I'm proud of you, Lucas, for how strong you were, for trusting me." He looked at me, curious. "Even when I didn't say anything?" "Especially then," I said. "Sometimes being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're waiting for the right time to speak." He didn't say anything back, but I saw it in his eyes. He understood. I kept the flash drive with the recordings locked in a drawer. I hope I never have to use it again, but I won't throw it away. It's a reminder of how close we came to letting something awful go unseen, and how important it is to listen when someone can't find the words. Life returned to normal, slowly. The school never made a public statement. The teacher's name faded into the background, but that was fine by me. This wasn't about public apologies. It was about Lucas. And now, when he walks into his classroom, he doesn't look down. He lifts his chin. He greets his friends. He answers questions. He laughs. He smiles. And for the first time in a long time, I smile with him. Not because everything is perfect, but because he's free again. And I helped make that possible, not with noise or threats, but with quiet proof and a father's resolve.